I'm sure you've seen it. I saw it yesterday. We have to talk about it. Welcome in, Falcons fans. Falcons Today by Chat Sports. My name is Moose. Stephen A. talked Michael Penix, and really, he didn't talk about Michael Penix. He just kind of blasted Michael Penix and the Atlanta Falcons based off of this last year, but also the injury history that Michael Penix Jr. is dealing with. We'll touch on everything that Stephen A. kind of talked about in this episode. Now, here's what you need to know. Where does the background info come from? Because I don't want to just jump into the quote that Stephen A. had said. Let's just fill this with a little bit of context. ESPN and First Take are obviously in San Francisco for Super Bowl 60 this week. They were on on site on a remote broadcast yesterday morning with Peter Schrager from the NFL Network. And Stephen A. dropped some sourced information that he claims is indicative of why Michael Penix Jr. does not go under center. We'll touch on it, like I said, here in just a second. Before that, though, I was talking to the other Trace, not the Moose, the other Trizzy, Trace Gerard, the host of Ain't Now, and he said, let's do a February sub battle. And I was like, you know what? You're on. So, at the very end of February, we are going to see which channel has the most subs, and we will figure out an appropriate punishment for the loser. So if you love nonstop off-season content between the Atlanta Falcons and New Orleans Saints, do me a favor, smash subscribe for Dirty Birds content and Dirty Birds dubs. All right, Stephen A. said what? This was a direct question asked to Stephen A. Will the Falcons regret taking Michael Penix Jr. 8th overall? That was the question posed by the moderator. Here's Stephen A.'s response. I think so. And it's not about his game, because this brother can play. Here's what I was told, and that's an important distinction here. This is what he said. Here's what I was told. You see him lined up in the shotgun and the pistol most of the time because it's difficult for him to line up under center because he has to bend his knees too much. I mean, damn. Okay, first things first. I don't want to pretend like I know who he's talking about. I don't know what source he's referencing. So when Stephen A. says what he's heard, you could take that with a kind of a pinch of salt, because who knows what that means. I don't know if he's got a source inside the locker room, if he's just using his prowess as Stephen A. Smith to get inside information. Who knows what was said by who to Stephen A., but I do want to break this down, because while Stephen A. might be a little bit brash sometimes and loud and outspoken, which is his brand, it's his calling card. That's what he's made his living being, is a very gregarious, outspoken host. And one of the things that I will defend Stephen A. on is I don't think Stephen A. is a liar. I don't think Stephen A. lies. I think there are times when he's a little bit off base. I think he can make things a little too personal sometimes. I don't think he is a liar whatsoever. So what are the Michael Penix Jr. facts that we know? First fact, he's got 5 season-ending injuries in 8 years. I will continue to beat this horse until it is good and dead inside the ground, because it is an important fact that you need to know. And the major injuries are not something like a broken finger or a little tiny turf toe injury. No, we're talking about significant injuries that impact his ability to not only move, but play the game of football. In 2018, tore his ACL. In 2019, had to have shoulder surgery. In 2020, another torn ACL on the same leg. That would being his right leg. And now in 2025, a torn ACL on his left leg. So he's had 3 torn ACLs since 2018, which is, at this point, about a 7.5-year swing. So here's what I'll say. If you're backing Penix and believing that he can develop, that's one thing. And I have no problem with any Falcons fan who loves Michael Penix Jr. that says, I believe in Penix. I think that's noble. I think that's admirable. You are entitled to believe what you want to believe. But start to think about the future for a second. Given the injury history and the fact that he's 25 years old already, does that sound like someone who's going to have a 10-year career to you? No, it doesn't, at least not realistically speaking. Now, maybe Michael Penix Jr. can carve out 2 to 5 years of really excellent football play. And I hope he does. I don't wish anything on anybody. I don't wish any ill will or shortened career on anybody. But we do know the facts. He is officially an injury-prone player. Fact number 2. Kirk played way more under center, even in Zach Robinson's offense, than Michael Penix Jr. Moose, that's not true at all. Where are you coming up with that bullshit number? Nope, not bullshit. Legit. Per Next Gen Stats, according to Mark Raimondi, Kirk Cousins had been under center 18.8% of the time since coming in after Michael Penix's ACL tear, compared to the 0.3% that Penix was in the pistol formation. That's insane. Cousins is in the pistol 11.5% of the time, and Michael Penix Jr. was in it 30% of the time. Well, Moose, no, we can go back to the first year that Kirk was the Falcons quarterback, and he was always in the pistol. Yeah, and Kirk was also injured, my friends. Right? Like, I get a lot of that is Zach Robinson's offense, and we'll touch on him here in just a second. But when a quarterback is old and injured, or just old, and you have another quarterback that is injury prone and prefers not to be under center or can't because it bends his knees too much, then you have to go out of the gun and out of the pistol in order to accommodate for their lack of being able to go under center. So when you have these two quarterbacks, one in Kirk Cousins, who's now 37, turning 38 years old, and Michael Penix Jr., who, by the way, is going to be 26 years old come May of this year, and both of them have mobility issues, that's a problem. And again, this is not an absolution of Zach Robinson. He sucked. Z-Rob was terrible. So good luck in Tampa Bay. But I will say this. One thing that is like a seed growing in the back of my mind is what happens if Baker Mayfield and Zach Robinson work? Then what? Then what do we say? I don't think it will. I'm very confident it won't work because it's Zach Robinson, and we already saw what kind of predictable play calling that he is able to draw up for his offense. But you can't deny that it's not something you've at least thought about. That's the second fact. Third fact, he panics against the blitz, guys. He was statistically not a Moose take. He was statistically the worst quarterback in the league against the blitz. I found a chart. Bad throws versus pressure faced. If you are far right, you faced a lot of pressure, meaning your offensive line sucked or teams blitzed you a lot, whatever. Look at Justin Herbert all the way to the right side there. That's because his offensive line was in shambles. J.J. McCarthy is also far right. So he faced pressure over 26% of the time and had a bad throw percentage of over 20%. Look at Michael Penix Jr. He's at 17% pressure faced and 22% bad throws. So here's my thoughts on this. Obviously, you can get better through reps as you go along against the blitz. Right now, I think he panics when he's about to get hit because he doesn't want to get injured like that again. That's what I think. And you could carve out specific plays if you're a Falcons fan. Well, what about the scramble that he had against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers? What about the runs that he had for first downs against the Carolina Panthers? What about them? Those are isolated plays. Look at the total of plays that Michael Penix Jr. had through the 9 games that he played this year. 95% of the time, Michael Penix Jr. is a statue in the pocket. He doesn't want to roll out. He doesn't want to be mobile. He prefers to just sit in the pocket. And the problem with that is if you are going to sit in the pocket, you've got to be great against the blitz, like Jared Goff. But Penix isn't there yet. So my biggest problem with Michael Penix Jr., one is the injuries. The next problem that I've got with Penix is the fact that unless you can completely revamp the way that you play inside of the pocket, unless you can quickly figure out how to attack the blitz, and maybe that's a scheme thing. Maybe Kevin Stefanski's scheme will help with some of that. I hope so. Unless you are completely revamping that part of your game, opposing defenses are going to know what to do every time. So, if I had to ask you that same question, what is Michael Penix Jr.'s biggest problem right now? Let me know in the comment section down below. And I'll be the first one to admit a lot of this is because he just hasn't gotten the reps. He's only played 12 games. So, and that's under Raheem and Zach. So, again, I will be the first one to say, I think there's a lot of give and take here. But you can't deny that there are some Penix problems that we have to at least acknowledge in this argument. Before we continue on with what Stephen A. had to say, because it got a lot more blunt really quickly, I got to tell you about our friends over at Factor Meals. Oh, guys, I love Factor. I'll tell you why. If you want to eat better, but you have zero time and zero energy to make it happen, Factor doesn't ask you to meal prep or follow recipes. It removes that entire problem. 2 minutes, real food, done. Choose from 100 rotating weekly meals with lean proteins, colorful vegetables, whole food ingredients, healthy fats, the stuff you'd make if you had the time. Plus, their new Muscle Pro collection supports strength and recovery. You get always fresh, never frozen, ready in 2-minute meals with no prep, no cleanup, no mental load. So do me a favor. Head to factormeals.com/FalconsChat50 off and use code FalconsChat50 off to get 50% off your first Factor box plus free breakfast for 1 year. It's a great offer. Offer is only valid, by the way, for new Factor customers with code and qualifying auto-renewing subscription purchase. Make healthier eating easy with Factor. So Stephen A. continued to talk about Michael Penix Jr. And interestingly enough, it got a little bit more blunt, it got a little bit more brash, and it got a little bit more candid as, that's kind of Stephen A.'s style. So here's what he had to say. You need a quarterback. If you're Matt Ryan, what you're saying is that clearly we're not good enough. Atlanta, you're in a good spot, speaking about Ryan, of course, because you've got an executive that is already honest enough to tell you what you already know, which is, damn it, you ain't good enough. We've got to take care of some business, and primarily it's the quarterback position, and the likelihood is that we don't have either guy that's good enough for what we need. Now, I'm going to disagree with Stephen A. there. I don't think the biggest problem is quarterback. The biggest problem is a lack of weapons at the wide receiver position. The Falcons had Drake London, and then everybody else. Kyle Pitts, yeah, fine. Bijan Robinson, yeah, fine. But if your second leading receiver on your team is a running back, that's a problem. I say it every video as well. If Penix is good to go week 1, he is your starter. I've said it 3 times last week. I'll say it 3 more times this week. If Penix is good to go week 1, he is your starter. But his leash is short. I hope Kevin Stefanski can develop him. I'm not even asking you to be, let's call it, through the first 8 games of the season. I'm not even asking you to be 6-2. Even if you are 4-4, or hell, even 3-5, but we're seeing clear and obvious development of Michael Penix Jr., I will be more content than I was last year because we weren't seeing Michael Penix Jr. develop. We were seeing inept coaching. We were seeing this team lose close games. So we need to see Michael Penix Jr. take that next step forward. But I'm also going to push back on some of you Falcons fans because I can guarantee you there's some crossover here. You cannot hate on Kevin Stefanski and say that you're ready for Michael Penix Jr. to develop. Those things are incongruous with each other. You cannot say, I hate the Kevin Stefanski hire, but then also say in the same breath, but we just got to see Michael Penix Jr. develop. Because what are you saying? That if it's a horrible hire, then he cannot develop Michael Penix Jr. And I think Kevin Stefanski has gotten somewhat of a raw deal when it comes to the quarterbacks that his GM and his owner have just schlepped onto his front step. Baker, okay. All things considered now, we know that working with Baker, probably the most talented out of all of these options right there. Deshaun Watson, also talented, but after that whole scandal that Deshaun Watson went through, he was clearly never the same. That is the worst contract in NFL history. After those 2 options right there, you've got Joe Flacco, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, Dylan Gabriel, Jameis Winston, and Shedeur Sanders. Backup. 5 backups and 2 at the time. It's actually more like 1 to 1.5. It's like Baker is clearly a starter. Deshaun had the talent to be a starter, but off-season things, lack of preparation, and just the entire shit show that was the Deshaun Watson contract, that took everything out of his football sales. So, really, you dealt with one high-end starter. Isn't that right, Gage? You dealt with one high-end starter and then 6 other guys that filled the position to the very best of their ability. Does that sound like Kevin Stefanski's fault? Now, again, if you are an offensive mind and an offensive guru, you can coach talent. You can develop quarterbacks, which is also where I will give Kevin Stefanski not a pass. I will not allow him to slide on this because Ben Johnson and Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan, those guys can develop quarterbacks. It's clear that Kevin Stefanski whiff. So he didn't do a good job with Shador. He didn't do a good job with Dylan Gabriel. So, again, some of this is this the greatest hire in the world? Probably not. But one thing I can guarantee you, as I am sitting here living and breathing, the Falcons are going to add another quarterback this offseason. Does that mean that it's going to be a veteran like Joe Flacco? Maybe, maybe not. Does that mean they're going to draft someone in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or 6th rounds because we don't have a 5th round pick? Maybe, maybe not. But I will tell you this. There will be another quarterback not named Kirk Cousins on this team next year. And again, you are going to see a very, very wide variety of fans that are like, make that guy the starter. Because ultimately, the goal is to get back to the playoffs. That's the goal. You got to get back to the playoffs. You got to get back to the playoffs this year. I don't care if you win the division. I don't care if you're the number 1 seed or the number 7 seed. If you get back to the playoffs, it will be a win. You've missed out on it for 8 years in a row. You got to get back there. That is the bar. Who's the quarterback that can take you above that bar? If it's Michael Penix, great. If it's not, put that guy in. Put the other guy in. That's all I got for you on this episode. Sorry, it's a lot of heated stuff, but this is something that we're split on, obviously. Falcons fans are divided. There are many of you that believe that Penix is the guy. There are many of you that believe that we should cut our ties and cut our losses immediately. All I know is that the leash now on Michael Penix Jr. just went from 17 games to probably somewhere around 9 to 10. And that's all I got for you on today's episode. Remember, let's beat the shit out of the Saints. Sorry for the coarse language, but I'm kind of fired up now. So at least help us beat the Aints Now channel. As always, Falcons fans, rise up and be cool.